Welcome to Madrid Reviews. This is your host, Christian Madrid. And on today's video, we're going to be talking about Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning. Let's get to my thoughts now, yo. Alright, y'all, let's get into this. So, I just watched the newest Mission Impossible film, and it was very good. It wasn't the best in the franchise. I still think Mission Impossible Fallout is the superior movie in this franchise. I really like the last one too, Dead Reckoning Part 1. But this was still a solid entry, and it was a solid send-off for the franchise. Christopher McQuarrie did a great job directing this movie, as always. He just does a great job directing these films, and there's no other director that can direct these Mission Impossible films, better, as he knows his way with an action film and how to direct it. He's been directing his movies since Rogue Nation, and he's done amazing work. He directed Fallout, which is my personal favorite. Christopher McQuarrie just did a phenomenal job as always directing this movie. The writing, it was good in this film, but it's not great, and it's definitely one of the weaker aspects of this film. The first half of this movie is filled with way too much exposition and drags on too long. Like, I think the writers think the audience is dumb and hasn't been following along with this franchise, because the first half is filled with way too many reminders of what happened in previous films. Like, I think some of that fat could have been trimmed down, and this movie would have been much shorter. And I think that there's too much exposition, and it should have got to the point a little quicker. I guess a reminder or two is fine, but all these reminders, every 10 minutes of what happened in previous films, I found it to be a bit too much, in my personal opinion. The second half of this film is amazing, though. Once they actually get to the mission, it's full of all this tension and action this series is known for. The action is still great in this film. It's great with terrific stunt work and fighting scenes. I think other Mission Impossible films did it better, but this film still has some great action scenes. The submarine scene was phenomenal in this movie. And then also, towards the end with Ethan Hunt and Gabriel, fighting on the airplanes, that was a badass scene. You know, if this is the last Mission Impossible film, then I'm okay with it. Even though the send-off could be improved and it could be a little better, but I'm alright with what we got. I think this franchise, it does, it does need to end. Obviously these films shouldn't be continuing forever. This seems like it's the final Mission Impossible film, and I would be okay with it. It kind of left it open-ended, if it wanted to come back 5-10 years, maybe by then, but like, I think they should stop. I think Tom Cruise should move on with his, his career and do other projects, with the Top Gun 3 and, any other future projects he wants to do. And I have mixed feelings with the ending, as, the continuity didn't add up, but I guess the writers went with what they felt was most fitting to the story. I'll talk about it a little bit towards the end of the review, because I'm going to spoil a few things. So yeah, the acting is great, as Tom Cruise gives a phenomenal performance as Ethan Hunt for one last time, and I'm truly gonna miss his character and his stunt work, in these films, as he's a great action star. And even though this franchise, it seems like it's done, I hope he continues to do more action films where he can showcase his great stunt work. Terrific. I don't know how the hell he did some of these stunts in this film. Like, you couldn't pay me enough to fucking jump from one airplane to another. You couldn't pay me enough. The cinematography is great in this film, as it's beautifully shot, and there's some tremendous camera work filming some of the best action scenes you can imagine. The production design is great in this film, with many great set pieces throughout the film, with some cool locations. I always like that about this series. They always come up with great locations in other countries and stuff. I love it. The effects used in this film are great, with a great balance of both practical and CGI effects. The sound effects do a great job in making this film feel like an action film with intense and energetic sounds, along with a tense score. The editing makes great use of montages from previous films, but it does drag a bit in the first half for me, and the pace does pick up in the second half. But I would say it's a decently paced film, but it could benefit from trimming the runtime by 20-25 minutes, I personally think. Overall, not the strongest entry in the Mission Impossible franchise, but still a solid entry, and I had fun watching this film. I recommend watching this film, especially if you're a fan of the other Mission Impossible films. So check it out. I give it a B. Weird and good watching this movie. McDonald's, Taco Bell type shit. Now, if you don't want the ending spoiled, I recommend clicking off right now. This is your spoiler warning, but I feel like I gotta talk about the ending. So, it's great. This action sequence between Ethan Hunt and Gabriel, they're fighting and fucking, what's it? So he knocks him out, and then, Gabriel, he's got his parachute. He's like, I got a parachute. Bye bye. And then it's funny. He like ricochets and then he hits his head. It splits open on the wing of the airplane. And I found that to be very funny. That was a funny way to die. But then Ethan Hunt, he gets on the plane. He's trying to, you know, he's trying to land it, but it catches on fire. But it never explained that he had a parachute, and then he got a parachute out of nowhere, and then that catches on fire. And then, Ethan Hunt, it seems like he's dying. He's trying to, put the thing, to stop the entity from blowing up the world. And then, for a sec, you think he's dead, because I thought he was dead. He saved the world, he completed a mission, and I thought he was, gonna die. But it turns out, 5, 10 minutes later, you learn that he didn't die. That, he survived and he somehow got another parachute. And that's what I was talking about earlier. The continuity does not add up. I think the emotional weight would have been there if they killed off Ethan Hunt. It's the last one, so you might as well in this one. So that's why I personally, I have mixed feelings about the ending. I guess it's fitting, but in my personal opinion, I think it would have added more emotional weight if they did kill off Ethan Hunt in the end. So that's just my personal thing about the ending of the film. Alright, y'all, so that is the end of the video. Don't forget to hit that like button, comment on whether you have seen this movie or excited to see it. If you've seen it, let me know your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and alert to know when I drop a new review. Appreciate you all for watching. See you on the next one. Have a good morning, afternoon, or night. Whatever time you're watching this. Thank you so much. What's your favorite Mission Impossible movie? Let me know in the comments below. Mine's Fallout, Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to watch me talk about movies. Thank you.